I don't think steamed vegetables are getting the credit they deserve. I think as a general population, we've really leveled up our cooking game over the last sort of 20, 30 years. And although we've come a long way, there are certain cooking techniques that I think we've sort of put by the wayside in favor of other kind of fancier cooking techniques. And one of those is steaming. I love roasting and charring and grilling just as much as anyone else. But I think that the steamed vegetable has a lot to offer. When you steam vegetables, you're not really adding any flavor or any kind of new textures, but what you are adding is tons of kind of juiciness and tenderness. It almost makes vegetables luscious. Whereas a roasted carrot will be crispy and you might put some seasonings on it and it'll be spicy, it can be flavorful. It also loses some of its kind of juicy vibrancy. So because you're not adding any crispiness or flavor during the cooking process, the key to making steamed vegetables exciting is all about what you do afterwards. So I didn't go grocery shopping today. I just grabbed what I had around the house. I have a couple of beets here. I have some carrots that look a little bit worse for wear, but that's okay. And I have half of a kabocha squash. I'm gonna start with the beets. I love beets, and roasted beets are hugely popular and they're great, but I'm gonna steam these beets and they're gonna be delicious. You can totally steam beets whole with the skin on and everything, and then it's really easy to peel the skin off once they're cooked just by kind of pushing it off with your fingers. But because these are so gigantic, I'm going to peel them and cut them first because I don't have an hour to sit here and wait for beets to steam. So I'm going to cut off the bottom and the top, being careful not to waste too much. And I always use a Y peeler. I will never use another vertical peeler in my life if I can help it. If you want to prevent your hands turning purple, you can wear gloves, but I don't really care about purple hands, you know? If I go out tomorrow and my hands are purple and somebody comments, I'll just be like, yeah, I was peeling beets. What do you expect? I'm going to cut these into reasonable sized chunks, something that's basically just going to help them cook a bit faster. So maybe I'll do like little wedges. I don't actually have a steamer right now, like one of those spidery steamer baskets. I don't even have a bamboo steamer. All I have is a pot, and that's okay. You can totally steam with just a pot. All you have to do is put a little bit of water in the bottom, which means that technically the very bottom layer of the beets will be more like boiling than steaming, but I don't really think that's a big deal. I'm just gonna load up my pot. I'm gonna pour enough water so I can kind of see it come up the sides. It's about 3/4 of an inch or so. And this is hot water from a kettle. And then I'm just gonna turn it on high. Once it starts boiling, I'm gonna turn it down to medium low and let them cook for about 20 minutes. All right, next I'm gonna tackle this kabocha squash. I've already taken the seeds out and I gave it a really good wash because I'm gonna leave the skin on. I love squash skin most of the time, especially when it's nice and tender. When this squash is cooked, you can't even tell the difference between the skin and the flesh, really. I'm just gonna cut into random chunks. I did learn a trick recently that you can put a squash in the whole thing in the microwave for a couple of minutes to help soften it, and then that makes it easier to cut. Sometimes squash can be pretty brutal to cut. I just turned the beets down. I actually moved them away from this burner because it's pretty noisy, so just put it on the stove. Kabocha is definitely one of my favorite of the winter squash family. It's way better than spaghetti, if you ask me. It has that really kind of dense, potatoey starchiness, but the flavor is so nutty and sweet. I just love it. To further illustrate the concept that you don't need an official steaming device to steam vegetables, I'm gonna do the squash in the microwave in this little casserole dish. I know that there are tons of new kind of devices that you can use for microwave cooking, and that's cool, but you can also just use a good old-fashioned Corningware dish. This is what I grew up on. I grew up on microwave steamed broccoli in these little dishes. I'm gonna pour about half an inch of water or so in there. And this isn't gonna fit, but I think I can make it work. It's good enough. And then I'm gonna put this in the microwave for about 8 minutes and then check them and see if they need more time. While the beets and the squash are cooking, I'm gonna deal with these carrots. Carrots are one of my favorite things to steam. Sounds like the most boring thing ever, steamed carrots, but I love how juicy they get. I'm gonna cut these on the bias. Steaming, as with anything else, you know, the thicker and bigger the pieces are, the longer they're gonna take to cook. Keep that in mind. I'm gonna do these carrots in a little bit of a fancier way. I just talked about how you can't really get any flavor into the food when you're steaming, but that's not really true because you can do what I'm about to do, which is to steam in chicken stock or any kind of stock. If you're trying to be really accurate with your cooking time, it's a good idea to bring the little bit of liquid in your steaming vessel to a boil first so that you actually start the steaming. And when you put the food in, that's your start time instead of putting it in cold and waiting for it to heat up because that'll throw off your timing a bit. But usually with things like carrots, beets, things that are pretty hearty, the difference of 1 or 2 minutes of cooking isn't really going to be that impactful. So I'll just put them in when the pot's cold and let it heat up together. If I'm doing something like broccoli, I'm probably more likely to bring it to a boil first, put the broccoli in, and set the timer. That's another thing that's important about steaming too, especially doing it this way where you're just using a little bit of liquid. You definitely want to remember that you're cooking. Don't walk away and start doing a bunch of other stuff because the water will evaporate eventually and you'll burn your food. So always set a timer, stay nearby, don't let it get away from you. I've definitely burned carrots by walking away and forgetting about them. Okay, so this is a rigorous boil now. I'm gonna add the carrots in. And yeah, this is kind of like, almost like braising. Like the liquid is coming up the side of the carrots a little bit, but generally what's happening here, it's a steam. The carrots are cooking in the steam that's produced by the liquid. So those are gonna take about 5 minutes or so. So I'm gonna start thinking about what I'm gonna do to zhuzh these up. So everything is cooked. The beets took about 17 minutes. The squash took about 12 minutes in the microwave. And these carrots took about 5 minutes. I drained the remaining water away from the beets and the squash. But with these carrots, because I use chicken stock, I'm just gonna reduce whatever's left, and it's gonna kind of help us kickstart a nice little flavorful sauce. We're gonna do this in reverse order because the carrots are right here. So as you can see, the chicken stock and the juices from the carrots have kind of come out and created a nice little glaze. I have a little bit of miso. This is gonna add the salt because remember, we haven't added any salt or seasoning to these carrots at all yet. That's about, I don't know, a teaspoon. Squeeze in some maple syrup and then just kind of mash it together. So I'll just drizzle that on. Oh, this is nice. Just check the salt level here. I'll pour them onto my little plate here. And they are salty enough, but they're not too salty. So if I wanted to, I could also add a little sprinkle of coarse salt, which adds some crunch. And if I wanted even more crunch, I could add some, like maybe in the form of some crispy onions. Store-bought crunchy crispy onions. And that is steamed carrots. They're so good. Next, let's take a look at our squash. So after about 8 minutes or so, I poked these and felt that they needed a few more minutes, so I just kept them going. I'm gonna dress these like a salad. This is my nutritional yeast dressing that I talk about a fair bit. It's so drinkable. We have this in the fridge at all times and pour it over things all the time. So I'm gonna be fairly generous. And steaming is also a really great thing for if you're a meal prepper, because you're keeping the food really neutral by steaming it. So one night you can drizzle it with some of this dressing. The next night you can, fire it in the oven to make it crispy if you want. You can have it cold in a salad. You can do so many things with it. So there it is, covered with this delicious dressing. And I'm just gonna dump a bunch of sesame seeds on top, and that's it. So good. Now let's take a look at these beets. So again, these took about 17, 18 minutes. You can make them firmer or softer. It's totally up to you. That's another great thing about steaming. It's really easy to just open the lid, give it a poke. These are perfectly tender. Oh yeah, love beets. I think I'm gonna do a really simple honey mustard thing here. I've got some honey, not very much. We're running low. And I have some grainy mustard here. I'm gonna use a fair bit. I love mustard. And a bit of cider vinegar. Because beets have a natural sweetness and we're adding the honey, it's nice to have a little bit of acidity with the cider vinegar. I'm gonna throw in some olive oil, a little drizz, and some salt. A good pinch. Yeah, punchy. Just gonna use my fingers to pull them out. Again, these beets would be great if you just chill them down and use them for a salad. Take my little dressing here. And I'm gonna be quite generous because this is really the only flavor injector that we're having here. So I want you to be able to kind of like smush the beets around into that sauce. Again, a little bit of crunchy salt for crunch. I just remembered I have some toasted almonds, so I'm gonna slice these up. I should say chop, it's more of a chop. If I had flaked almonds, I would totally use them. Flaked toasted almonds are one of my favorite things to sprinkle on any food, sweet or savory. These are so delicious. I love steamed vegetables. I hope I've successfully glorified steamed vegetables for you, and that if you haven't been steaming veggies lately, that you get back into it, because it's such a good way to cook. It's light, it's quick, you don't need any fancy equipment. You don't even have to make these dressings or sauces. If all you do with your steamed veggies is drizzle them with some olive oil and sprinkle them with salt and pepper, they're gonna be really good. And I guess that about wraps it up. Thanks so much for tuning in this week, and I'll see you next time.